I am Doug Friedman.
I am Kenzie Genest.
And this is Your Mental Breakdown,
the podcast.
Welcome.
The podcast.
Welcome, one and all, and you.
Ladies, gentlemen, and non-binary folks.
And Beckett.
And Beckett.
Yeah.
Hello.
I think you like recording because it gives you Beckett time.
Hey, don't call me out like that. I'll do anything to touch your dog, okay? You're right. That's really the only reason I'm here.
You know, it's funny because we were talking about recording, and it's still fairly new for you. This is your second episode with us.
This is my second
with me,
time.
With
Are you
everybody.
Multiple people?
Multiple personalities.
The zipper comes down.
So we were talking about this, like the
This.
opening. You know,
Yeah.
like, oh, do you do a cold open? Do you do
This
this?
right here.
And what do we do? And to me, it's funny because it mirrors what often therapy sessions are like, where clients kind of go, well, wait, how do we start? What do we do?
Right. What
and
do I
even
say?
therapists go like, what do I say? What do I do? Like, how do I
Yeah.
start? I'm like, well, some people small talk or chit chat. Little
How's
bit.
the weather? Yeah.
Sure.
Like, oh, I'm enjoying this weather. I
Warm
hate this
up a little
weather.
bit.
Okay.
Literally and figuratively warm up.
Right. What does this weather say about your personality? Oh, okay, you're hot. Okay, are you angry? And when we psychoanalyze
Right.
based on their feelings about the weather. Yeah.
I wonder if there are therapists out there that sit down or you guys that are in therapy, if you are in therapy, who see your therapist and they just go, so last week we were talking about this.
Yeah.
Like, oh, okay. It's sort of like a TV show where it's what did they say?
Previously on.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Previously on
Yeah.
Your Mental Breakdown.
Yeah. It's an option. We could do that, but do we want to do that?
I don't know.
I don't know either. We talked about Sarah. Previously on, we talked about Sarah.
Or it could have been we talked about Drew.
We talked about therapy.
That's true.
Welcome back. We're going to be talking about therapy again. every time, just say that.
That's what welcome back. Last week we were talking about therapy.
Mm-hmm.
Today we're going to talk about
Therapy.
right, but next week.
We're really going to talk about therapy.
That's right.
We
That's
love
right.
therapy.
Yeah, we do.
I really do. I am a little obsessed with it, I'd say. Yeah. I can be obsessed with it, right? And I think about it probably 24/7. Is that bad?
24/7? Yeah, that might be a little bad.
It keeps me up at night. Is that bad? This is turning into Kenzie's therapy session. Oh, dear.
Well, how do you feel about that?
Oh, God. I was watching Mad Men. I've been rewatching Mad Men.
Really?
Yes. And, I don't want to get too controversial here, but they make therapy look god-awful, which, I mean, it's psychoanalysis of the 60s.
Wow.
But, the guy is just sitting there, the therapist, right? Like,
the clipboard?
not with the clipboard,
Oh,
not
wow.
looking at the client. It's Betty Draper. She's just sitting back, smoking a cigarette. And he literally says nothing. Nothing.
Oh.
And she's just spiraling, free associating, getting nowhere really, and
Right.
just...
Right.
Oh, it really makes me upset. I get heated when I watch those things. And then, of course, he's unethically consulting with the husband. And I'm like, thank God we have progressed in our mental health field.
Some. Did they train you in school or early on about sitting in silence with clients and how to do that? Because you work with teens
Doug.
a lot, right?
Oh, Doug. I do. I work with teens a lot. I don't know, though, with teens, I don't find myself sitting in silence a lot. And maybe that's because of me, because I overcompensate and I want to fill the silence.
Sure.
I mean, you ask my partner, I am not good with silence. Like, it is not good for me. I am like, turn on that ambiance video. Like, we are not sitting in silence. It just doesn't do it for me. That's my own stuff for sure. With clients, it's where I feel the most discomfort. For sure, is sitting in silence. So psychoanalysis would not work for me.
Well, and there's a lot of people that would say, right, but if you go into that discomfort, if you create that discomfort, something comes out of that. And I get that. I experimented with that when I was starting out and working with teens a lot. And especially with the teens that did not want to be there and that were kind of challenging me. And, you just sit there and you wait for them to make a move. And
Wow. Do you?
You can. You don't have to.
It's an option.
Right. And when I was first starting out, I wanted to explore what that was like. And I have sat in more than a half an hour of silence.
Wow.
And it is so tough. After a while, you just kind of like come to the other side. It reminds me of one of my favorite depictions of a therapist in film and TV. I think we've talked about this. You and I
so.
probably talked about it on here. It's Good Will Hunting. There's that scene with Robin Williams and Matt Damon when they first start therapy, that it's like a standoff.
Yep.
You know, and you can't flinch.
Right.
And I get it. It's sort of the power dynamic.
See, I don't like that. It makes me uncomfortable.
Yeah.
To me, I'm like, okay, if you don't want to talk, like maybe that's a people pleaser in me too. I'm like, I'll fill the silence. I can do that. I have questions. Like, I'll keep talking.
It's also different when you're working with teenagers that don't want to be there.
Yeah.
Or adults that don't want to be there for that matter.
Yeah.
Versus we're in private practice now. People come see us and they're paying us
that's a good point.
Decent amount of money to talk about what's going on with them. So even doing something like having some chit chat and small talk at the beginning, they're like, yeah, let's do this to warm up. But okay, now let's get to it because time is money. I'm paying for this. Let's go.
Yeah.
And they want to talk about what's going on.
I was going to say, actually, I think when I was working in schools, it was a little more like trying to fill the void, fill the silence, right? And oh God, half of them don't want to be here. How do I make this as fun as possible? But in private practice, yeah, I'm like, wow, they actually want to be here. This is awesome.
Yeah.
They want to fill the silence, you know, most of the time. And then there are times when I'm like, the silence is good. It's important. They need to process something or feel their feelings like we were talking about last week.
Absolutely. Speaking of silence.
Yes.
Couldn't even do it. Couldn't even hold it. You made it like less than 3 seconds.
Why'd you out me like that? Oh my God. You caught me red-handed.
Right?
I'm not good at it.
Well, I'm glad that you and I are not in silence. You guys out there listening, if you don't want to be silent, feel free to reach out to us, email us, tell us your thoughts, comments. We will get to them in weeks to come. Talk about what you're saying to us, maybe. You can email us at info@yourmentalbreakdown.com. Find us on social media, wherever you socially media.
That's a phrase, term.
Socially mead?
Yeah.
No?
Wherever you mediate socially.
Wherever you socialize on the internet.
Yeah.
We're there, your.mental.breakdown on most places.
You should do an Ask Me Anything on Reddit. That could be fun.
Why don't you spearhead that?
Oh, God.
Go, Kenzie, go.
Hi, I'm an associate therapist. Ask me anything about my crippling anxiety. I'll tell you everything that I don't know. On
that note, let's get to Sarah and her not so crippling anxiety.
Yeah, because she's made progress.
She's made a lot of progress.
It's amazing.
Yeah, even week to week. Even since last week when we last saw her.
Yeah.
Let's hear what she has to say this week, and we will be back on in a little bit to break it down for you.
My kids we do 1 on, 1 off days, which I hate. So we did the 1 day on, 1 day off arrangement, which now that they're older totally sucks. And I have to contact his dad and be like, would you be able to take him? And you know, at this point, I don't even want to engage him. So basically, I just put it all on my days. Then I get a call today from his school principal that yesterday he asked to be excused to go to the bathroom during a class. Him and another kid booked it off school campus. Well, he didn't tell me about it because he was with his dad the day it happened. But he should have told me about it last night, and he didn't. The principal was like, should I also call his dad? And I was like, no. Like, I'll handle this. He's for sure in trouble. Like, he's for sure going to have some kind of grounding. My initial thought when she said, should I call his dad as well, was just like, no. Because remember, I told you about the fiasco from last time. And I feel fine about it now. I feel like before I would have felt a little guilty not telling ex-husband these types of things when we're supposed to be co-parenting. So I don't know if that's wrong, but I don't feel bad about it.
Yeah. And that's right, wrong. I don't know. It's what's effective and what's not effective. And this was a choice that you made, and it is effective. You know, I think there's something about if you don't have to have that control, that Sarah will handle it attitude about it. That's the protective mechanism that you're used to. And that's, you know, I'm not saying the right thing to do was let the school call him. I'm not about right or wrong in that sense. You know, it's just for you to, instead of just instinctively go, no, I'll take care of it. And that's, you know, I say this to you many times, that's sort of the trauma response. It's also, like I said, your superpower, that sense of that system of safety that you've developed, that hypervigilance, that protective mechanism. Yeah, you're going to use a little bit of that there and go, no, let me call him so that I can control this a little bit and make
I'm
it
not
easy.
even going to call him. I get what you're saying 100%, but I think in this case, I'm protecting myself by handling it, and I'm protecting son, because he does need to be punished for sure. Son will still learn the lesson without being subjected to that nonsense, because I don't even think that's productive. I don't believe that teaches him more of a lesson or less.
I'm going to introduce a word. It's almost a synonym for punishment, but not quite. I just want to hear how it lands for you, because a lot of how I hear you talk sounds like what you know from your upbringing and what seems right. And a lot of people do it. There's nothing wrong with it necessarily. But when you talk about punishment, to look at natural consequences for actions. And natural consequences, it's, if you do this, then this is what happens. It's the consequence. I'm not punishing you. There's just a consequence for your action. And I don't know what you think of that idea. I just want to introduce that just to hear your thoughts on that.
No, I love that. My problem, I'm going to just say I'm a terrible disciplinarian, straight up, right up front. I'm sure it's because of all kinds of shit.
The idea of a natural consequence is very effective, and it's very, very hard to do. It becomes easy to stick to conceptually because you're looking at, every action has a consequence, right? Mm-hmm. And there isn't a judgment. Can you give me like
for instance?
I can. And it's
like, what's an act or a consequence of what he did, for instance?
Okay. So you snuck out of class and went and did this thing. So now a consequence of that is for the next 2 weeks, you're going to go to school and come home and you can't go anywhere else. What? Because you took advantage.
Easy that was for you.
Right. Because you took advantage of your freedom. Now some freedom is being taken away. That's a consequence.
See, I love that. And that's perfect, because to me, that is, what's the word I'm looking for? The punishment fits the crime.
Yes, exactly. And there's something about it for you that can be, believe it or not, very healing for you individually, that has less to do with your kids and more to do with you. A lot of how you were brought up was, as you just said a few minutes ago, they did something wrong, so they needed a punishment. There's a lot of judgment and that sense of punishment. It's shaming. It can be traumatic. Not always, but it can be.
It's always been something for me that was really difficult. And of course, sure. I've been talking to you now for a while, and I can see my fear around the word even punishment.
Yeah.
Consequences for me were always so severe, and I never felt that they were appropriate, right?
Right.
In my life.
Right.
So what
I
do is swing the pendulum, like you say, in the complete opposite direction.
I was incredibly traumatized by really severe abusive punishment. And I had a sense of doing things wrong. So as I got older, embedded in me, that sort of critical voice in my head was one that had a overdeveloped sense of what was right or what was wrong, or developed in a way where I can't do anything wrong, neither can anyone around me, because there's going to be some punishment coming. And it's no fun to live in fear, so we live in vigilance of not doing anything wrong. That's why the concept of meets expectations or good enough, in part, doesn't sit well with you. I think if we can introduce the idea of a natural consequence, again, it can be very healing for you.
I love that.
Your kids are old enough. What's really cool is you can involve them in the consequence. not in the punishment. Involving them in a punishment is you did something wrong, so here's your punishment. Here's what's going to happen to you.
I love this.
Yeah.
And I love how easy it was for you to just go, okay, because he did that, this would be the natural consequence. And once you said it, it made perfect sense. I think as adults, we realize the natural consequences when we make the wrong decision or we, do something wrong. Yeah. We are aware enough to go, oh.
There's even an idea of some people call it karma or balance. So we're not really getting away with anything. And I think what you and I are talking about now is that idea of a natural consequence with your kids. Why is said you can involve them is they're old enough and you could say, oh, well, this is what your action was. What do you think a natural consequence should be? And it's not, what do you think your punishment is? It's having them take part in it because you are not the judge and jury handing down their sentence. You are somebody helping them take responsibility for their own actions.
Exactly. And that's super important to me. I feel like I've really failed as a parent in that aspect because if you remove me from the equation and my weirdness around, punishments and things, and my pendulum swung all the way to the other side, there's this like sort of burden always in my heart that I want my kids to be able to handle life, right? And this is something that I really do find that I focus on more and more the older they get. You know that story you told me last week, right before we ended, which I just loved so much, about the kid? He was on the phone and then he was like banging it and everybody wanted to put him in restraints. But you were like, I want, just give me a minute with him.
Right.
To me, that story like made a huge impression on me because you allowed that kid to feel his feelings, to get through whatever his initial anger and this and that, which was really heartbreak in the end. And the only reason he finally got to that place where he was crying was because you allowed him to experience those emotions, right?
Right.
Like you do with me. Mm-hmm. So for me, there's a real conflict. It's this Sarah and this Sarah, which is they're teenagers. Obviously they're going to try and sneak out and they're going to try and do this. And then there's this Sarah, which is, oh, hell no. You're supposed to be in school. School is your job right now. That's not okay. So I like when, the way you gave me take my emotions out of it and just say, this is what happens. This is the consequence. Yeah. And then I just have to stick to it.
Well, and that's sticking to it is partly the hard part, because we're talking about, you're recognizing your black and white, your one side or the other kind of reactions to things, right?
Yep.
That this side or this side, the angel, the devil, the Yoda, the Vader, any of that, and finding that middle is not one single fixed center point. It's finding that range. And it's a hard place to be in that range. Sometimes it's uncomfortable. What I want to revisit with you for a minute here, that concept of I am failing as a parent. In this area, I'm failing as a parent.
Yeah.
I want to revisit that, especially with what we're talking about, is looking at how you were so incredibly impacted by having a sense of wrong and right according to somebody else's rules and punishment. Yep. So I want to hear your thoughts and just really scratch at that idea of you saying I failed as a parent in this aspect.
I believe, and I'm not to be boastful, but in every other way, I'm a very good parent. There's always a feeling of, I really can't figure out why I can't get this down. I've had 14 years to learn to
Right.
stand my ground and say, I'm sorry, you want to scream, you can go to your room and close the door and you can come out when you're done screaming. That's it. Like, I'm not mad at you, but you're going to be in there until you come out. And I was very good at that until I would hear the, and then I would be like, oh my God, like run in the room and pull her out. I had to physically leave our home and allow ex-husband to take that thing away from her because I couldn't hear her cry for more than like 5 minutes without just breaking. It's a conflict for me for sure.
I hear that, and something emotional happens to me as I hear it. I don't make the leap right away to, yeah, well, that explains why you failed as a parent in this aspect. What do you think's going on in my head when I hear that?
I mean, I'm just guessing here because my reaction is a trauma response.
Well, now you're telling me what I want to hear. Okay, fine. I'm less concerned with, did you say the right answer? There's no right or wrong. I'm looking for, can we step outside of Sarah's normal way of thinking about things and look at how can Sarah see it differently?
I was never taught or shown a balance, a support system, or a correct way to be disciplined or have a consequence that I was never given that as a child. There
Right.
was no baseline for me.
Right.
So to me, my kid getting, my kid's in trouble, they did something wrong, they have to be punished, and they're mad at me or they're crying. I go straight to, okay, well, you probably learned your lesson. Please don't do that again. Because I just don't want to have to.
I don't want to have to what?
I don't want to have to feel the guilt, maybe, or I don't really know what the word is. I don't like to feel that I've upset my children, and that's makes me sound ridiculous. But I actually am kind of ridiculous in that sense with my children. Because I shouldn't have that fear. Yes. I mean, I'm the parent. They can be mad at me, right? In theory. And I've just never been able to get myself to a place where I'm comfortable being the bad guy, I guess.
Yeah. And this is where your incredible system is protecting you from feeling, period.
Interesting. Wow, Doug. Yep. It's crazy.
Not crazy. The opposite of crazy.
It's not crazy. To me, it's so normal to think of it the way when you say things like that, I'm just like, whoa. And it does. It like all just kind of plays itself out in a totally different way. Because right now I'm just, criticizing myself. Like, what is wrong with you? Now it's all starting to. I hope I haven't screwed my kids up for good.
You haven't. You haven't. And, I've said it to you before, I'll say it again. If your kids wind up in a therapist's office in a few years or a decade or whatever it might be, that means you did something right, not wrong, because they're getting support.
There's a part of me that absolutely understands that sometimes you need a therapist. But then there's a part of me now that's thinking, well, shit. So I've just done the exact same thing to my kids as happened to me, but just on the completely opposite end of the spectrum because of my own issues.
Yeah.
That's not a fun realization, but it's a good one.
Why is it a good one?
Because it helps me. I've been so conflicted about this for so many years, and I've never stopped like I just did now and went, oh shit, that actually makes sense. Because no matter how many times I tell myself, this is what it is, let them cry, let them roll their eyes at you, let them be angry, let them slam their door, I physically can't, or up until today, fingers crossed. I mean, obviously it's not going to instantly change, but I feel like now I have a different perspective on what the actual issue is. Like you said, so I can be kinder to myself, which I think actually helps me learn a different kind of lesson that's not analytical, it's emotional.
Wow. I hear that and I think, wow, you are not failing as a parent. You are growing as a parent. You are evolving as a parent. That's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
Wow.
I think actually everything we've been doing together has been helping me to grow as a parent as well. My kids told me the other day, they were like, Mom, both of it, we were talking and we just want to tell you, like, you're so different. You're so much more chilled. So I think that it is bleeding over into different aspects of my life. But the fact that my kids noticed was really nice for me. It means it's actually starting to bleed over into my subconscious because I'm not actually thinking about it at home. Right? Home is my safe place. I can do whatever the fuck I want here. This is my place. So the fact that I'm relaxing here, to me, was a pretty nice thing to hear.
I'm going to give you a pop quiz. Okay. And if you don't like this, don't do it. You do not have to take my quizzes. Okay.
Okay, Doug.
I'm going to put a pin in what I just did right there. But here's the pop quiz. Son has a snack, has dinner, whatever it might be, sticks his dishes in the sink, walks away, leaves them there. You say, hey, son, left your dishes in the sink for a couple hours. Now, thinking of natural consequences and thinking of what we've talked about, what would come out of your mouth next? In the perfect world that doesn't exist, we're just kind of like playing with this.
If I hadn't already cleaned up all of dinner in those 2 hours, that would be my natural consequence to him. Since you did that, you now get to put away the leftovers and wipe the counters and clean up the dinner mess. That would be, a good consequence for that. And he would never put his dish in the sink again because he hates cleaning.
Right. Do you think that would be a good consequence?
I do.
Okay. Is that different than a punishment?
Yes. Yes and no. It's the natural consequence.
This is new to you. And I can see you guarding against doing anything too harsh to your son. And yet what you're also doing is making sense of a natural consequence. Your action has created this natural consequence, and here's the next action that follows it.
I love this because I feel like it also might help takes the guilt away from me.
Here's the fun part of this, and where it becomes a natural consequence, not a punishment. And it can become a conversation because an idea here is you're making it less about you, Sarah, the mom, and more about their action. It's pretty cool because now what we're doing is giving them some choice, giving you guys a way to talk about it. And man, Sarah, you will not recognize it, but subconsciously it is healing what happened to you growing up. So I say again, you did not fail as a parent. You were failed by your parents. And you had to navigate it as best you could. And that has carried over to now. And now you are evolving and looking at things and trying it a little differently. What do you think of that?
I love this. This is one of those moments, Doug. I love how you took away both sides of my worry. You took away the worry of being too harsh and punishing too hard. And you also took away any guilt I might feel over it because it's the natural consequence. So maybe the first time I'll get a little whatever from the kids, but after that it will just be like, well, you knew what happens. You leave school in the middle of the day, then You go to school and you come straight home. This is like perfect.
Yeah.
Love this. You're like the Sarah whisperer.
No, I am the guide. You'll be doing the whispering, because you're going to feel out what feels right for you being on the other end, and softening that, as you said earlier when you told me the answer I wanted to hear, that trauma response. And it's really cool, because there is something about this too that I hope you also recognize, and this is sort of my like last minute mic drop moment. These systems of safety that you've developed were there to protect you, and they were there for good reason. And maybe what we're learning now is they're still there and they don't serve us as much anymore, and we don't need them. But you have to walk through that and learn that as
little Sarah.
Really hard to do, but being able to do it through your kids. I've told you this, you're going to get to reparent yourself. I think it's just unlocking the ability to have a feeling and the permission to feel it and let it out. That's what you're doing.
Yep.
And we're back.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi.
All right.
I think this session is cool. And the reason why, I know.
I think it's lukewarm.
I'm going to say this every single time. Actually, maybe I'll think of a more creative way to get into it in the future. But I think here we really do see some of the progress that she's made and how it kind of embeds itself. I think that's her language. It bleeds into other areas of her life. And so that's why now we're getting into kids and how her kids have even seen progress, right? They're not going to be like, Mom, you've made so much progress, but they see it in other ways, like, wow, you're acting so much chiller now. You're so calm. Like, who is this?
Right.
It's cool.
I love it. I think I've told you and you guys out there too. One of my clients likes to call me the therapy ninja. It's sort of like you get in there and move things around and you don't even realize anything's happened. Then 6 months down the line, you go, wait, I don't do this anymore.
Mm-hmm.
What?
Mm-hmm. And yes, this is something I was just talking to a client about, how we are as humans not very good at tracking our progress because we've got other things to worry about. We're not super mindful in the sense that we like know what's changing all the time, right? So the great thing about therapy is that we get to reflect back to clients and every week remind them of the progress that they're making and show them the progress they're making that maybe they're not able to consciously realize and to see because they're in it. They're living it day to day and they're feeling like the same person.
Right.
But on the outside looking in, it's like, whoa. This is change. This is how change happens.
Absolutely. And as therapists, we're trained to look for this and see this and reflect it. I've used this analogy with Drew a lot, where if you go to the gym and start working out, week to week, day to day, you see yourself every day. You're not going to see much change. Week to week, you might not see much change either. But in like 6 months, you're going to be like, whoa, wait, your biceps look, oh man, you look ripped. Somebody I know, I was hanging out with them and they were saying like, oh yeah, I was doing some weightlifting this morning.
Oh, who? God, that's obnoxious. Who brags about that? God, it's so annoying.
Were you really weightlifting?
I really was. I do weightlift.
Wow.
Yeah, humble brag. I do it truly for the mental health benefits of it.
Right now, I'm like, oh, you do? Really? Oh, okay.
Because you wouldn't know by looking.
Right. However, if I don't see you for a few weeks, I might notice, but in a few months, you might not notice that much difference, but I'll go, dude, Kenzie, you are ripped right now. What's going on?
Right. And I'll argue with you here that it's actually not like an aesthetic thing for me. So I wouldn't even want someone to like comment on my body necessarily. It's really more, fair. I do it for maintenance at this point. It's just health. Like it's truly just, I don't want to get osteoporosis or like whatever, right? Like I do it for health. I do cardio for health. And that's it, period. I don't care what my body looks like at this point. Like it just is a necessary self-care. You should have seen the faces we just made at each other. Not right. Not right.
So, Sarah.
So anyway. Okay, so let's get vulnerable for a second here because this episode in particular, I have a lot of feelings about and also a lot of questions, and we'll get into it, obviously. Yep. That's why we're here. One being, though, I'm a 30-year-old newish therapist, and I'm child-free mostly by choice. And I know you also don't have children.
Right.
And we're talking about parenting here.
Yep.
And it's interesting to me because it just hits on one of those bigger insecurities that I came into this career with, which is like, I'm not going to have kids, and I'm going to have clients who have kids. Right. And undoubtedly, kids are going to be a part of their presenting problem. It is going to be a huge stressor in their life and something, I mean, their relationships. I mean, relationships are everything. And with your kids, it's a big part of your life. Anyway, I wonder how you go about that, you know, being a not parent, right? I mean, you're a parent to Beckett, to your dog, and I hope to be someday too, but it's certainly different with human children.
Oh, for sure.
And I know you've worked with kids, you've worked with teens, so have I. And I feel like it still only gets me so far with understanding parenting. And it's not like we give advice as a job. That's not what we're doing per se. But we get into this idea of natural consequences versus punishment. And it is in the world of parenting advice, right? Or parenting stuff. And so how do you go about that?
Well, you're right. I'm not a parent to my own child. That's true. What I have done is work with a lot of children, a lot of teens, had a lot of conversations directly with them, directly with parents, probably more so than any parent has with their one kid.
That's a good
so
point.
There's a level of experience that I've had with kids and parents. Yeah. So I understand that aspect. I also understand what it is to feel unconditional love for something and conditional love and to feel love and annoyance or sometimes even hate at the same time.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So you have all of those that you can pull from and they're universal. So for one side of this, I can relate to the experience. On the other side, there are some clients that are parents that will say point blank, are you a parent? Or that some actually assume that I have kids because of how I talk about being a parent.
And then do you then correct them or tell them, you know, do you disclose that?
And sometimes if it comes up, if they ask me point blank, of course, I'm not going to lie or hide that. And someone will say, wow, you don't have your own kid? And I'll say, no, but I've helped raise hundreds of them, which is true at this point.
Yeah.
But it's different when it's your own. And I feel a certain way about Beckett and Franklin before him. So I understand that. That's not even my own species.
Right.
I get a part of it. And I think everybody has had the experience of being a kid with parents.
Yes. Oh, dog. I was just about to get there because that was my next point. Like, but we've all been kids. And so we kind of know at this point, if we'd done any level of introspection, we know what we would have wanted as a kid. Like if we didn't have the really supportive caregivers or we didn't have that secure attachment, I think we've all been kids. And so now as adults, we're like, oh, that would have been nice to have as a kid.
Yeah. I think you and I share this, that in our high school days, having a therapist or maybe somebody that just understood was so deeply meaningful. So having that experience meant something huge to us. And why I love working with teens is it keeps me sort of in that mindset of, oh, here's what's going on. I get it. All of this stuff is happening to them for the very first time.
Yes. You said that to me recently and it really hit home for me because I was like, oh my God, you're right. I couldn't really put a finger on like, why do I love working with teens so much? I mean, yes, I was a teen when I first had a therapist. I wanted to sit in her seat, like blah, blah, blah. Right. And yeah, wow, there's something novel and special about helping them work through the very first breakup, first love, first this, that, the other. Like it's special.
It's special. It's also oftentimes the biggest thing that's ever happened to them.
Yeah, yeah.
And their frame of reference for life is so small. You know, when you're 15 and something happens for a couple of months, that's a huge amount of time.
Yeah, yeah, because it's relative, to their life. Like, wow, a year relationship?
Right.
Whoa.
And again, why I love working with teens is it keeps me honest to that idea. And the idea that so many parents have becomes very dismissive when they go, oh, don't sweat the small stuff. No, don't worry about that. No, in time, you'll understand. That's so dismissive.
Yeah.
I join with them on, yes, this is the biggest thing to have happened in all your life. And it's huge. And here's, and then you kind of go
how
from
to
there.
deal with it. Right. But I really appreciate that with teens, the concept of like, this is so valid. Your feelings are so valid around. Of course they are. Like, you don't know any different. Of course, this is happening to you. And I think that's what you help Sarah with, is like helping her join with her kids in not dismissing their feelings. Obviously, I don't think she did that to begin with, but also being able to recruit them into their consequence, right? And like building that agency and integrity with them is awesome. Like, what a good reframe for any parent, I imagine, right? If I'm putting myself in the parenting role, wow, what a reframe to be like, oh, I can invite my kids into this experience that's a learning opportunity and a chance for us to connect.
Absolutely.
Cool.
And with Sarah in particular, it's not just a coincidence that I just mentioned natural consequences and we're doing this work. And it's also something where I've said to her, we're going to have the opportunity to reparent you through your kids.
Yes.
I've said that many, many times. So I've kind of planted those seeds along the way in her therapy. And now as we were doing this and she's seeing what this is like, I reflected to her towards the end, like, see, and here's the healing that you're able to do through the parent-child relationship, and you're reparenting yourself.
The thing I think I feel the most, I don't know if it's jealousy, right? Like if I were going to have kids, right? It would be, wow, for that really healing experience to reparent yourself. Like I do envy that in a sense. I think it's one of the most beautiful things about parenting is that you get to break the cycle, break the patterns, if you so choose, right?
Well, one of the coolest things as a therapist is to work with a teen and kind of help them break a cycle or see something and see as they get older. And oftentimes, not always, but oftentimes, you see them not just break the cycle, but want to do things so differently that they might even wind up drawn towards therapy themselves. Or at the very least wind up as, all my friends talk to me for advice, or they do this or they do that. Not because we created that in them, but they're just looking at things a different way and seeing the impact of what happens when you break the cycle, when you do things differently. Hopefully it also means they're able to live their own life the way that they want to. That's what you were saying earlier about building agency for them.
Which is huge because, I mean, obviously this is kind of a controversial thing right now, this whole idea like, oh, the youth, they're all just snowflakes. Like we're making them too sensitive, right? And I think it's finding the balance, right? Not that there's this like actual balance to be had, but the range, as you usually call it, right? Like of finding that their balance of agency, resilience, right? Resiliency and feeling your feelings and just being sad when something is happening. And like, you can be sensitive about it. It's okay.
There's a few different ends of the spectrum, even though I guess there's only two ends of the spectrum, but points along the spectrum. Like Mad Men and what it was like in that time to be a kid and how that was.
Oh, yeah.
And then there's Sarah and how she was brought up. And a big part of why I was going through this with her is that she didn't have that experience. She wasn't given any agency. Agency was taken away from her.
Exactly. And that's entirely. The reparenting part. Like she gets to experience that via her kids by virtue of being the parent that she didn't have. It's incredible. It's amazing. Kind of going back to the beginning, actually, just because I want to pick your brain about this. I think oftentimes as therapists, we get clients coming in from the get-go just really overwhelmed, right? And I think this is one of those sessions where she comes in, she's like, there's just so much going on right now. I don't know where to focus on. There's so much going on. It's been a crazy week. And they're spiraling a little bit, right? They're jumbled around. They don't know what to focus on. How do you kind of bring a client back into the moment or back into, hey, what do you want to focus on today? Like, how can I best support you with all of this stuff going on?
Yeah, it's interesting because this is something I get a little flack for. And Meredith used to really challenge me on this.
Okay.
Where I would say, I don't really care about the details, about the content.
The content.
I'm more interested in the process. And the reality is, of course, I care. I'm listening. I retain everything. I've got a pretty decent memory. So I do care. I do listen.
Yeah.
And I am more interested in the process. I'm more interested in what this means and what we can do with this and how it fits in the larger picture of therapy.
Yes. Right.
So when Sarah's coming in hot and here's what's going on and here's what's we've been at it for 8 months now. In the beginning, I would often just let her go.
Yes, because she needed that.
Right. She needed to get that out. She needed to do that. Something that you've heard me do, and you guys have heard me do this a lot, is I will go, oh, hang on, I'm going to pin that. There's something I want to hit there, but just keep going. So I'll kind of mark something that way, and I'll let her continue, right? Because they need to dump more of the content, more of the details out.
Right.
I will also stop them at some point and move them towards the process a little bit, or help them see something a little differently. Sometimes you actually just need to keep validating them because they need to have this experience and they need to see this.
Right. And that's something with, I think, a client like Sarah, and I have a lot of clients like this too, who are very intellectual. They can justify, right? Like they're just coming up with reasons for everything. They want to make sense of everything, but they're not going into their feelings. So it's, at what point do you kind of have to throw a wrench in that cycle and just be like, hey, I'm hearing a lot going on, right? And a lot of it is just, it's content, right? And we'd say it maybe in a different way to a client, but I'm hearing a lot of stuff, right? Like, okay, how do we bring it back into like, how is this all affecting you? How are you processing it?
Yeah. And again, what does it mean for the larger picture of you? Like that idea, we talked about this last week, like when a client feels like they're in a ditch, we can go into the ditch with them because we know the way out. So if they're processing it, we should, as therapists, have an idea of a way out, a way through the processing, a way towards something. It doesn't mean we have to get to that destination right away, but we need to move in that general direction. So for her, I heard a couple of things going on. One, she's venting something and getting worked up about something. Okay, I got that. We've talked about that before. We talked about her over enunciating or getting into that mode of being. There's something about how she was almost slipping into what you've mentioned before, Kenzie, last week, that justice warrior mode.
Which is a theme, a pattern of hers.
Yeah. We've also talked about, for her, just being able to let some anger out or express something. And I want to honor that. And yet I want to acknowledge process-wise what was going on. So I've said to her in this session, like, okay, that's the protective mechanism. I hear that. Okay.
Identify that.
Right.
Yeah.
And I don't have to spend too much time on it because we've talked about it. She knows what I mean when we say that.
Yeah,
and
you're just tagging it with her. Yeah.
And themes of control, which we were even just talking about last week with her, right? That issue of power and control in the cult and being raised by that. And I'm hearing that, I'm like, okay, I hear some of that too. And part of this was, do I tell his dad? Yeah. What do I do with this? And what do I do with him? And how do I do this? And what, okay, there's fear, there's power, there's control. All of that's going on. And it was reaching a point, but she hit something where she was kind of like, well, so what do I do?
And then my question to you, Doug, is, so what do you do when a client is like, so what do I do? Right? Because there's a problem solving aspect to it too, where maybe a client really does come in that day wanting to problem solve and like, how do I handle this specific situation? Right. Or do we zoom out and kind of look at the more general theme pattern?
I'm smiling because I'm about to say my least favorite therapist answer thing to these.
It depends.
Close.
Oh.
Well, both. Right?
Yes, and the improv therapy.
Right. This session with her could very easily have been, how do you navigate telling your ex about what happened with the kid? What do you do with co-parenting? What do you do with the kid? What do you do with the spiral, as you said?
Yeah.
Like, oh, you're in this place. What do we do with that?
Yeah.
It could have gone several different directions, and none of them, I think, are wrong.
Okay. And that's where sorry to interrupt, because I want to hear the rest of this. I'm constantly in that overthinking anxiety of like, there are so many ways this session could go right now. And I see the different paths in front of me and I'm like, which one do we choose?
Right.
How do you know in that moment? I guess it's an intuition and it's a retrieving information from previous sessions. Like what's going to be the most useful and effective right now?
Sure.
Wow, what do they need right now? There's just so many questions I think that you're constantly asking yourself. Like, how did you come to this decision? You know what? This is about those general themes of power, control, like those dynamics. And let's get into like the kids.
Yeah. So part of why this work is very exhausting and very draining and very rewarding is I think of the forest and the trees at the same time all the time.
Yeah.
So when I say I'm not interested in the details, but I'm logging them.
Yeah. You might just not be talking about them.
Right.
Yeah.
So I'm looking at the trees. Meredith, when we talk, she's very much a trees person and doesn't really see the forest.
Okay.
I don't want to just help navigate somebody through a bunch of trees.
Yeah.
I need them to recognize you're in a forest.
Right.
How do we overall do this? Because I'm not going to be here for every tree that comes your way.
Yeah.
So for a lot of how I work, I'm thinking of the tree or trees right in front of us and being in the forest. And I want to highlight both of those things. I guess that's just some way my brain works, is that I can see both of those and talk to somebody about both of those at the same time. In terms of which way do I go, on the bookshelf over there, you might see a bunch of Choose Your Own Adventure Dungeons and Dragons books. They were my favorite as a kid.
Awesome.
They were like little tiny books, and you get to the point in the book where like, if you want to pick the apple from the tree, go to page 37.
Yeah.
If you want to avoid the tree and think something better will come along, go to page 22. If you want to chop down the tree, whatever it is.
The world is your oyster.
Right.
Yeah.
And full disclosure, I would often flip to page 37 to see how that ends up, and then go back to where I was.
The other option.
Right. And then check out the other option.
Yeah.
Wait, and I wouldn't even have to read a page if I see it goes the end at the bottom of the page. I'm like, no, I don't want to end. Okay, let me take another option.
Yeah.
And what's funny is I still have the books on my shelf.
Yeah.
I loved reading them multiple times as a kid, not just because you could choose different things, but because I never wanted it to end. Right?
And you had that choice too, I think, right? The luxury of being able to just see all the options.
Right.
Yeah.
And life is not a choose your own adventure book.
It's not Dungeons and Dragons.
No.
Dang it.
I wish.
I wish too. Oh
I mean, it could be a Game of Thrones, but
You went there.
Dragons, Khaleesi,
Oh,
but
I got it.
I know you did. But what I think we want to highlight is, in therapy, it's sort of like a choose your own adventure book in real-ish time, where we can go, okay, well, what about this? What would this look like? What would happen here? Oh, what about this? What about that? And that brings it right back to the idea of natural consequences. Okay, if you make this choice, then what happens here?
Nice. Yeah.
Right?
There is going to be a natural consequence. And I'm saying consequence in quotes right now because I think this was I talked about this last week, honing in on language for me, where I get a little too literal. I think this is one of my fatal flaws. I get too literal with language, and I know you're very metaphorical. You are so easily, you can whip out an analogy and it just makes sense, which I admire. I think it's awesome. I'm not there yet, I don't think. I'm much more literal with my language.
Right. So
I hear natural consequence and I think, okay, but the example that you give her, right? And when you do this pop quiz with her, which we'll get to because I have questions with that too. It sounds like the same thing, but packaged in a different language. Like it's still a punishment, really. I mean, they're in trouble, they're getting a punishment, but the language is different. And so it's hitting them differently and it sounds and feels differently. But at the end of the day, like if her kid is not doing the dishes or, they get in trouble at school and okay, like your punishment is that you gotta, whatever, you gotta stay at school later, whatever, it's still a punishment, still a consequence. It is what it is, right? It's the same net result, if that makes sense. So I guess that's where I wonder, like, what do you think is the mediating factor here? Like what's working? There's
a connotation that consequence is something negative. Sort of like selfish is something negative. Selfish isn't negative. You're thinking of yourself.
Yeah.
You might be putting yourself above others and above other things. Okay, well, there's a spectrum of it.
Right. It's not
a consequence is not inherently negative. It's absolutely not a punishment.
Okay.
There's a consequence of finishing my vegetables at dinner. The consequence of that is I get dessert.
And maybe get some nutrients and some fiber.
Right. Then there's a consequence of weightlifting. The consequence is I might just feel good. I might get bigger muscles. I might tear a tendon, whatever it is. There are natural consequences to lifting weights.
It's not a punishment per se.
It's not a punishment. It's something that happens because of this.
Like no matter what, there's going to be a consequence to every action, cause and effect.
Yeah, exactly. It's much more about cause and effect. And that's why I pointed out that connotation for you and what that means. It's because for Sarah, everything seems to be a punishment.
Right.
And that's why in her head, she's holding, I can't do anything wrong. So we're looking at, well, it doesn't have to be wrong and it doesn't have to be your judgment. That's the big thing about mentioning natural consequences to her. And I've worked on this, like I said, countless teenagers and kids and parents that I've talked to about this. So I know it backwards and forwards.
Of course. Yeah.
She doesn't know it at all. It was a brand new term for her.
Yeah. And it really resonated with her.
Right.
Like it made me so happy that it clicked so well for her. And we'll see too, like how well it worked for her. Like it just made sense.
I think she even said something like, right, the punishment fits the crime. Yes.
Right.
If there's a crime, there's a punishment. That's cause and effect. I think cause and effect is a much more effective way of saying it because it's not always a negative thing.
She did correct herself at one point in the session. Maybe, was it punishment or was it the word threat? It was the threat of a consequence or the threat of the punishment or something, where she realizes, and you call her out on it, which is awesome to bring awareness to that. Hey, you did that on your own. You corrected yourself. Like, it's not a threat. There are natural consequences to every action. It's not even necessarily they're getting in trouble. It's like, hey, can we use this as a learning experience to maybe do better next time?
Also for her, knowing that, and she even mentioned it, anything for her, like a punishment or for her, what consequence meant was the sense of shame, judgment, and it was in fear. There were such incredible consequences for her in the cult and her growing up. So she had this hypervigilance and fear about not doing anything wrong. And when it comes to my kids, I don't want to do anything like that for them. But you don't have to be judge and jury.
Yes, I love that.
They can join you in it. You can bring them into this and say, it's your action. So what is your consequence? It's not me. I'm not judging it. I'm not the jury. It's, well, what naturally would happen because of this?
And I'm your parent. This is a relationship that we have. This is a teaching moment, a teachable moment, right? And a reparenting moment. Like, it's a reciprocal thing. It works, it's symbiotic. It's really beautiful. And I love that it really worked for her. It takes away the harshness, I think, of punishment. And we've kind of learned too, I think, in a behavioral aspect, like punishment doesn't usually work that well. Like positive reinforcement is usually like, maybe in some ways is a better way to go about things.
And something she and I have talked about too, I think I even explained to her in the past about when I worked with kids and a parent would take something away from them.
Right.
Like, that never works.
Right. The
it
negative
never
punishment.
works. Yeah. Right. If you're going to take something away, have it be because of an action they took, and this is the consequence, and let them know, here's the consequence. Because you were playing video games and didn't finish your homework, I'm taking away your game system for a period of time until this happens, and then it will come back.
Right. Be really clear and concise with the language so that there's no confusion.
Right.
Yeah.
When you just take it away, that's a punishment. And there's nothing to learn from that. And I don't know when I get it back. And now I'm in a state of fear. And now, this isn't okay.
Which is little Sarah being in this state of fear where she's like, I'm imagining her in the little cabinet, right? Or whatever, where she's just freaking out with her sister. And it's like, no wonder there's fear there. Scared. You're scared to do any harm to your child. And so I think at the end of the session, she even says like, wow, you took away multiple areas of my worry, right? Like, I didn't want to be too harsh on the kids. I felt like a failure as a parent, and that was a big thing. And I'm sure we'll get to that too, right? Because that's a huge thing that I marked. Like when she said, I just feel like a failure as a parent in this aspect. And I like that you went back to that point, because she said it kind of nonchalantly and just kept talking. And I was like, God, I hope Doug gets back to that, because that put up a flag for me for sure. Because wow, that's strong language. I feel like a failure as a parent, because wow, what we know of Sarah is she's anything but a failure as a parent. She's doing great.
She even says that later, like, one area where I know I've done well is parenting.
She knows she has some strengths in parenting. Yeah. And I think because she's smart and she sees the difference between the way she was raised and the way she's raising her children, she can acknowledge that for sure. But in this way, she does worry that I think she's not exceeding expectations, right, with parenting, as she would probably say.
Right. And she also, again, seeing the forest, not just the trees, and seeing her processing, not this aspect, but just how she processes. She did a couple of incredible things to me as the therapist that I loved hearing. It wasn't all black or white.
Yes.
She was talking about the pendulum swinging. She was noticing this stuff. She even recalled the story from the week prior.
Right, she did, yes. That's how I knew. And I was saying last week, this story really, really resonated with her. Because I had listened to this session and I was like, wow, she actually brought it up in the beginning of the session, or she brings it back in, and just the natural consequence. Like, all of it is working.
Yeah, so she's reprocessing and thinking of things as she was when she was a kid. She's thinking of how she's modeling or mirroring that as a parent to her kids. That's her process. And it's opening now where it was so closed before, in part because of how harshly she was raised. And now she's, again, opening up to a different way and kind of opening the little Sarah up in her.
Yeah.
So she's able to experience something different now too.
Speaking of black and white thinking,
Ruh-roh.
I think, no, I often think on a theoretical level, and by that I literally mean theory. And so I'm thinking CBT, psychodynamic, right? Like I kind of look for that when I'm listening to a session like that, because how often do we actually get to listen to a brilliant therapist do his work, right?
Oh.
And we get to identify like, oh, that's an intervention from that theory and that's that and whatever. Right. And I don't know. Right. That's what my brain does. But the black and white thinking, as we know, is, a common cognitive distortion from cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT. Correct. And I think what I love, and just a moment of praise, if I might, for you, Doug, is one of the things I love that you do is you so subtly like sneak in the little psycho ed about black and white thinking or any cognitive distortion, right? And like this one in particular where, she kind of came to it on her own, which is even better, right? Like that's awesome that she can come to it on her own because she has made so much progress. But I just love that you're not explicitly unpacking that, distorted way of thinking, right? But it's there, you make a comment on it, and then you relate it back to the overarching themes and patterns in her life. It's not right or wrong. It's,
I will say this.
Yeah.
With great power comes great responsibility. And it's not just a line from Spider-Man. It's that as therapists, our clients are listening to what we're saying and it has great impact. In fact, some weeks you might say something to a client and they'll come back and repeat something. You'll be like, oh my God, I said that?
Yeah, you forget that you said it.
Right.
Yeah.
So when we say some things, it actually lands. So planting these seeds that I do, I know some of them are sticking. Yeah. Especially because my style, I'm very repetitive. So I'll say these things, not just once or twice, but 14, 15 times.
Yeah.
So
and that's intentional for sure.
Yeah. And it's intentional. It's subtle. It seeps in and they get it. And then when they say it back to me, it's, there it is.
Yeah.
Wow.
You'd be so proud of me. I love when a client comes in saying that. Yeah. But that's what I'm talking about. That subtlety, I think, is actually what's missing in a lot of, my grad school program, just any teachings on how to do therapy. I think that subtlety is really missed because we're like, how to be manualized, how to psycho-ed, thought tracking, how to identify cognitive distortions. But it's not enough, and maybe this is controversial to say it, it's not enough to just say, hey, I'm going to point out that cognitive distortion you just had, right? Like that's black and white thinking. I think if you can embed it in the bigger picture, the forest, right? Like it's more effective. Like you said, you're planting those seeds, you're relating it to their actual experience and their life in multiple domains, in multiple ways. And it becomes like an overarching, these are kind of this distorted thoughts I have. It's not just, that's black and white thinking. Okay, I shouldn't do that. I'm going to reappraise that thought, right?
Well, yeah. And I think the biggest thing that I'm taking from what you're saying is I am present with my clients. I'm listening to what they're saying. I'm intentional with what I'm saying for the most part. And if you remember, there was one point in here where almost the flip of what you're talking about, the same exact thing, but flipped, where she said something and it was a throwaway line, but I didn't let her throw it away. Where she said something like, I just don't want my kids to feel what I felt. That's crazy, right?
Right. And you said not crazy.
Right. And it's those things like that because it's reinforcing a narrative for her that, that's crazy. Oh, I'm silly. Oh, that doesn't make sense. No, that's not crazy. It's actually the opposite of crazy.
Right. We're not going to reinforce that. Yeah. I'm not going to just agree with you or just skim over that.
And I probably said it a few times. Yeah, no, that's not crazy. It's actually very normal. It actually makes a lot of sense. It actually came from this. And this is why you're doing it. And it's your upbringing. And look at this and look at that. So she's, instead of just that throwaway line, like, isn't that crazy? Yeah, totally crazy. It's, no, that's not crazy. Oh, wait, it's not. It came from this. And this is what it means. And now I'm doing this.
Right.
So we're softening something that was, as some people say, hardwired in there. No, it's not hardwired. Let's soften that wire a little bit. Yeah. And that's just one little throwaway thing that wasn't thrown away that we might revisit over the course of the next 6 months and see where she is with this. That's the ninja.
Right. That narrative of like, is this crazy? Am I crazy? And I think a lot of us feel that way, right? Like we feel alone in our problems and like the things that we do are crazy. So to have someone on the other side of the room telling us, that is not crazy.
Right.
There are actually so many reasons for why this is happening and why it's seemingly automatic for you. It is automatic for you. And we are literally rewiring your brain right now.
Right.
And it doesn't have to be explicitly, hey, these are your cognitive distortions, like we were saying. Like it actually can be brought up by insight. And this is why I was going to say like CBT and psychodynamic. I think there's this great debate in the field where it's like, it's either or. It's psychodynamic or it's CBT, present focused or past focused. Why not both? Because they go so well together. Insight can breed the knowledge of, oh, this is why I have these distorted thoughts.
And that's exactly what this was. We didn't then go into, oh, where did this come from? So many clients will go, why am I like this? Why is that like that? That was just a moment where, no, it's not crazy.
Yeah.
Because of this. Here's why you're like that.
Yeah.
But we're talking about this over here, so let's get back to this. It's just doing
planting
a little
seed.
Exactly. Those seeds will grow if you water them and nurture them. Absolutely.
I love it. And selfishly as a therapist, I am thinking, oh, that's reassuring, you know? Like it doesn't have to be in every session we're touching every single thing and we're really, really not just planting a seed. We are watering it. We're nurturing it. Like, we're getting in the soil. No, it can literally just be sprinkling some seeds throughout the session.
And we'll hit this perfect timing right towards the end. It's where she says, wow, you're the Sarah whisperer. Like,
okay, yes. Oh, that was going to be my mic drop moment for you.
All right,
Doug.
go for it.
Well, I just wanted to ask you because she does call you the Sarah whisperer. And I said, how do you not let it get to your head?
Because it's not about me.
It's such a simple answer.
It is right now. It is right now. We're doing a podcast about my therapist. So let's go, man, damn, I am on it. I was on. I will take credit. I no longer like completely deflect and go, well, it's totally about the client. And I did a breakdown with my mom on one of these and she gave me a compliment and I did in real time say, thank you, period.
Which is nice. And something you're working on with Drew, which is a really big one for a lot of people.
So that moment where she says, oh, you're the Sarah whisperer. In that moment, it was important for me to recognize, oh, wait, she has a history of following a leader. I'm not her leader. I want to show her, which is true. I'm not the whisperer. And it was such a great way to reference it. Like, I'm a guide. You're the one whispering. It's her voice in her head. It might sound like me for right now. That's okay. It can sound like me.
Yeah. They can borrow our voice for a little bit.
Exactly. They can borrow our voice for a minute. It's actually them saying it to themselves, them whispering. It's not that Vader voice in them. It's growing their Yoda. It's this is the voice.
Yeah.
She is the Sarah whisperer.
Yeah.
I'm the guide. Cool. Yeah. And yes, that moment in this session, I will pat myself on the back and go, hey, cool, nice catch. Yeah.
Totally, because I think another therapist, I don't have one in mind, but I'm just saying, other therapists could take that, ooh, I'm the Sarah whisperer. Dang, I have this on lock. Like, I know this client. Wow, I could do anything. I could go anywhere. Like, she's going to believe what I say. Like, you could get a little cultish with it and really think that you are this almighty therapist that can do no wrong. And that would worry me.
Sure. And I will say, I think it is important to acknowledge that with colleagues. And where the idea of the therapy ninja comes from for me is my wife had a session with somebody and came running up the stairs in our office to my office afterwards and was like, oh my God, check it out. I was totally being a therapy ninja. Right. And she was so proud of what she was doing in the session with this family she was working with and how she like all these seeds and what she was doing and how that was planting and like maneuvering and getting into it. And it was really cool. And we had a high five moment about that. I think as therapists, we need to do that.
That's true. We do.
So that's why I will pat myself on. I used to not. I used to deflect and not take credit. I will take credit. I don't have that narcissistic ego where it's going to go to my head. I go, oh yeah, that was cool. Yeah. Cool. What's next?
Cool. Thanks. And moving on. Because it's like, hit it. Like, that's awesome. You are doing the work with her. Like, she could do this without you, and it's really helping her to be doing it with you.
Right.
Right. I mean, if it's not going to be you, it'll be somebody else, but she's getting the Doug treatment, right? Like Doug therapy. So of course she's thanking you specifically, and there's nothing wrong with that. So saying thank you is a good thing. I think nowadays, I would do the deflecting thing for sure. I would be like, oh gosh, no, but you're doing all the work, like this isn't about me. But you're right. I think as therapists, it's important to remember this is work. This is our job. We are trying our best here, hopefully.
Yeah. It's why I get paid the medium bucks.
Okay, but before we wrap, can I ask one question? I must.
Fine.
We can't possibly skip over the pop quiz thing.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Because you even said yourself, I'm going to put a pin in what I just did there. Right?
Uh-huh.
You said that. And so I'm like, what did you just do there? Because now we're back to her maybe trying to just like give you the right answer. Because a pop quiz kind of implies there's a right or wrong answer. It's a quiz. So what was going on through your brain in that?
Okay. So I did the pop quiz.
Yeah.
Because I wanted to see if she was getting the concept that we were talking about.
Of course.
Right?
Yeah.
As soon as I said pop quiz, and I mean, her expression was fine. She was with me on it. There was nothing that hit for her, right?
Yeah.
However, I realized, and I wanted to put a pin in, I just did what you were talking about, Kenzie. Yeah. I just put you in a position of you need to get it right or wrong.
Okay.
And maybe that idea of surprising somebody with a pop quiz that has a history of trauma is not so smart in the moment. And this speaks to the trust that she has with me.
Definitely.
Right. Mm-hmm. And I will at some point revisit it with her and just go, hey, remember when I did the pop quiz? I realized, I'm sorry, that kind of wasn't fair. Yeah. And she'll probably go, no, that was fine. That was fine.
Yeah.
Like, I loved that. Like, right. But here's what that could have re-traumatized, or here's why that wasn't fair.
Right. It could have been too familiar.
Right. And I just want to have some accountability and take responsibility for that.
Yeah.
That could be, okay, cool, moving on. But so many people in her life haven't taken any responsibility or accountability for doing things like that to her. Mm-hmm. So even me doing that to her in a wonderful context where she's learning something, she's really into it, I wanted to pin that and just go, I realized there was something a little off about that.
Mm-hmm. And I think that is so powerful. And honestly, as a client, my favorite thing that my therapist does is apologize and say, something left a bad taste in my mouth from our last session, or like, I wish I didn't do this, or I regret not going here with you. Like, I love that. I love the transparency. I love the accountability. That is really, really healing. That is the corrective emotional experience, is somebody apologizing and owning their role in this. Yeah.
Well, and I will say that I am sorry, Kenzie, that our time has come to an end for the podcast.
Crushing.
Right? But we will be back next week.
We will. There's more.
There is always more. And if you guys want more, you can find us on social media at probably your.mental.breakdown, because the dots are important. I don't know why. It's just what happened. But you can search us anywhere.
Yeah. Just
email
Google
us. Send us your questions at info@yourmentalbreakdown.com. Feel free to rate us, review us, share us with your friends, get us tattooed on your forehead.
Obviously.
Oh, wow.
If you're a true fan.
Oh, no. I was going to go with a nice thigh, like big thigh placement. Like or back, a big back tattoo.
But then it's always covered.
Oh, that's right.
Show your pride.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Right on your forehead.
Yep.
There you go.
Or I'll stop listening.
Well, we will not stop. We will be back next week. Thank you guys for tuning in.
Thank you so much.
We'll catch you later.
All right. Happy to be here.
Bye.
Bye-bye.